Alhamdulillah, wa Rabbil Alameen, As-salatu salam ala Rasulillah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, lil ikwani wa akhwati, fi Afrika wa Europa wa America wa Caribbean wa kuli makan. Halin wa salin bikum. My dear brothers and sisters that are here now, Assalamu alaikum, my dear sister Amina, and those who will show up in the future. This is a culmination of the segment of the black man and his family in dealing with the Afro Arab question and dilemma. And I've covered quite a bit in our last couple episodes about the misunderstanding from our relationship with the African Arabs and the Toubab Arabs. Again, for those who are not familiar with the term Toubab, Toubab is a Mindi, Fula, a Mandinka word that designates Europeans, white Americans, and also foreigners, and also a black person who's from the West could be called Toubab as well because of his orientation. So when I use that word, it doesn't mean any derogatory names that we call the white man in America. It does not mean that. So I'll use terms like Toubab Arab, meaning the color of the skin, the whiteness of the skin, and plus the heritage of their European heritage, namely the Roman and Eastern European lineage. So I wanted to make sure you understand that because I had some questions. I've had some Toubab Europeans and Americans question me in reference to this word, and they did not like it. And I explained to them that this is part of my heritage from the Mindi and Fula people, and this is the proper term that is designated for them. So I straightened them out, but if they liked it or not, I'm not sure. It didn't make a difference. But I wanted to make sure. They wanted me to use English words. I said no, I will not use it. I will use the designation as my mother's ancestors used, which was Toubab. So with that said, now, my brothers and sisters, we get into the last part. You see this thing I had up there says the Afro Arab connection. And you saw I had a map previously, and then I changed it, and I showed a black man dressed in Afro Arab attire, and a beautiful young Afro Arab sister. And so I wanted to now get us to a point we're going to have to deal with and talk about again our ancestral great brother Malcolm X, as he's known in America. We know him in Islam as Imam Malcolm Al Hajj. You cannot talk about this issue of the Afro Arab, the Toubab Arab, without mentioning Malcolm or Imam Malcolm Al Hajj. Cannot, because he was an integral part of this, and he played a significant role. And his relationship with the African Arab and the African and the Toubab Arab is unparalleled. We haven't had any other black leader with such influence as this man had. And we have to discuss that. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brother Hariba. And I will say this to you. I have been upset today because, and as you saw what I wrote under the marquee about the Pan Africanists and the Black nationalists and the Arab nationalists will be upset about this, because neither one wants me or anyone else to discuss the hidden history that I'm going to expose here tonight. There's been excerpts in the book about him in his autobiography, but now we're getting this from people who have been silenced over all these years and now are come forward because they are the sons of some of the Afro Arabs who were extremely close and who were mentors to Imam Malcolm Al Hajj. I'm upset because inside the United States, many of our so-called scholars on Imam Malcolm Al Hajj, those who now join him, I'm talking about Malcolm X, they refuse to give you this history, further widening the spectrum on why we have problems with the Afro Arab and the Toubab Arab. The Toubab, namely the Toubab Arab historians or nationalists who do not like black folk, and even Afro Arabs. They don't care for them either. They discriminate against them too. That's the bottom line. I'm telling you, this is the truth. They discriminate against Saudi, Omani, Yemeni, Moroccans. They discriminate against them too because they consider themselves to be Toubab. And so they, in turn, do not want their population to know anything about their relationship with a black man. So it has upset me today because especially on part of the African Americans who know this history, but they keep it because they're quote unquote Pan-Africanists. And I have to say, my brothers and sisters, again, we go through this issue about Pan-Africanism. And I'm going to have to use the vernacular. I'm a Muslim, but I'm going to have to use the vernacular of the hood in Compton. What the hell is that? If you talk about an ancestral African American and you leave out integral parts of his history, especially with his brothers who are Afro Arabs, what kind of Pan-Africanist are you? This is a question I lay to them. And they have seminars. They've on YouTube. They're talking about our brother and they leave this history out. Shame on them. Even though that, yes, we came on the same ships, but I'm a Muslim. We must talk when there's something wrong, even if it's against ourselves. We must lay it out. And when I found this history, we've had here now, we have an African Arab who've explained the history that has been hidden somewhat from our brother and his dealings with the African Arab. Shameful. Shameful, my brothers and sisters. Shameful. Shameful for the Pan-Africanists who are doing this. And the brothers who give lip service, but they hate Malcolm because they're in bed with the Toubab Americans. Let's be honest here and be frank. They're in bed with the Toubab Americans and they hate Malcolm. They hate him. That's why when you see them on YouTube, they can't even speak his name. They have a hard time even speaking his name because they're in bed with the Toubab Americans. So I give you this out because I want it clear. Assalamu alaikum, my dear brother Isaac. I want this clear that the full history of our great ancestral brother Malcolm should be explained in full, especially to my children and my grandchildren who are now coming up. They don't know too much about Malcolm, Imam Al Hajj, except some of the stuff is there. They only talk about what's happened inside the United States. Shame on the Pan-Africanists for doing this inside the United States and the Black nationalists. Shame on them for doing that. Because you will look at something and you will see that the history is not quite right. You say, how did Imam Malcolm Al Hajj get all this recognition worldwide? How did he stay inside the United States and only get this? This is what they try to peddle towards the African American inside the country. It's wrong. So with that said, my brothers and sisters, salam alaikum. Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Now, let me give you something about our great brother, Imam Malcolm Al Hajj, and the Afro Arab factor. It was great, my brothers and sisters. It was a great union, and it facilitated things for African Americans inside the United States that our brothers inside the United States and also our enemy, the racist Toubab Arab Nationalist. He developed friendships with very powerful African leaders, Black African leaders, and African Arab leaders as well. Our brother spoke at prestigious universities in the Afro Arab belt. Here in Morocco, he spoke. He's also spoke in Senegal. He also spoke in Nigeria and Liberia. He also spoke in Egypt. And he was so touted, and his education, his intellect was so great that he was honored. Now, I'll get into, because I got to be long because I'm going to cover this, because I'm going to cover this about our brother. And I want you to do the research on him, and those, who may not want to know about our brother Malcolm, that's fine. But that's up to you. And I'm going to give it out. And however long it takes, I'm going to do it, because I got to talk about our brother and this connection, because the connection between the Black man today and the Afro Arab has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by fools and scoundrels and charlatans. And this relationship shouldn't be at its best. I mean, should be at its worst as it is now. It should not be, because a lot of history has been hidden from both parties. And this is why we have the disconnect. And this is also why we have the disconnect between the continental Africans and especially in particular, the African Americans in America, because of this devilish connection of here. We have Uncle Tom Negroes. We have down the river Negroes. We got Klansmen. We got white racists who make the situation between the Black men in America and the Afro Arab and the Africans a very difficult situation, which should not be. So our brother Malcolm was very important, my brothers and sisters, very, very important. And I'm gonna go through these things to show you the how this alignment came about. And there's many of the many of the Afro Arabs have been obscured in history. They have not been mentioned. And that's not right, because these people are Africans as well, and we should not be discriminating against them. And some of this is because of the Muslim triangle, and they don't want the Pan-Africans don't want to promote Malcolm or Imam Malcolm Al Hajj and his real conversion to Islam. They want to keep him in the Black nationalist framework, where he was considered all Toubab devils. That's where they want to keep our brothers and sisters there in that narrative. They don't want to show that he changed after he received the correct teachings of Islam, to show that there's a brotherhood, Muslim aku Muslim. They don't want that out. So here we cannot understate the Malcolm X, Imam Malcolm Al Hajj connection with the Arab world. We cannot understate it. Not with all this evidence we have here now that I have, and I'm only touching some of it. It is fascinating what I have picked up and learned. Fascinating. And we know that it was our Afro Arab brothers who brought Malcolm from the Black nationalism to the Sunnah of our Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. That's right. It was not anyone inside the United States that did this per se, but we had African Arabs who actually nurtured and mentored our dear brother and brought him from the fallacies of the Nation of Islam. I'm not going to get into all their stuff here. That's not what I'm here for today. As a Muslim, I will say this: those Muslims who are listening to this, and Muslims who will hear this in the future, and those who do their research, there's still an outstanding fatwa against Nation of Islam that we cannot marry among their people. And I'll stop it at that. We as Muslims must follow our scholarly body work, our scholars when they put down fatwas. You cannot overrule it unless you have something that's pertinent. And then you must be also a scholar of sort in order to do it. And you cannot. So they've issued this fatwa against them that we cannot marry their people, meaning I cannot marry a girl from Nation of Islam, and nor can say my daughter, she cannot marry a man from Nation of Islam. Just cannot. This fatwa is still outstanding. The Afro Arabs who came in contact with our esteemed ancestral brother, Rahmatullah alayhi, fostered friendships and brotherhood, which was unmatched in modern times between Black men and Afro Arabs, and even Toubab Arabs. He had fostered a union that we don't see today. The closest I can say to that has happened is, remember Gaddafi, Rahimahullah, and Farrakhan of Nation of Islam. They've have similar dealings. They have mutual respect, and we know that Gaddafi, Rahimahullah, he did give. I've got 20 million to Nation of Islam for them to develop a product for Black folk inside America. So they had a unique, pretty good relationship, and also Gaddafi with the late president of Zimbabwe as well. So that's kind of close, but still not of the magnitude as this situation here, as I will explain. And our Afro Arab brothers and many Toubab Arab brothers finally ridded the heretical false teachings of the Nation of Islam and got our brothers to the right Islam. This is the precursor. This is what they had done. This is the greatest gift that they gave to our ancestral brother Imam Malcolm Al Hajj, is to bring him from kufr and shirk that was still operating today in Nation of Islam to the sunnah of our prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This is their greatest gift that they gave to our dear brother. Now, someone will say to me, "Oh, you're hitting now. You're lying now. The brothers over here, the Pan-African, the this and that. These people here. This is how it got him." No, it's not the case. You got to look back at the history, our brothers and sisters. When he was thrown out of the Nation of Islam, he went back into Africa again, and he had already forged friendships. These people were instrumental in nurturing him and protecting him all the way to the time of his death. So let's get that straight right now. Now, let's go to this. In 1959, our brother went to Africa, and also he visited the Afro Arab belt. And he ended up going to Saudi Arabia. He also went to Sudan, which I'll get into Sudan by his comments about Sudan. And also the leader at that time of Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, he was there as well. They were trying to foster relationships, and they were also trying to build the NOI base in America, and also try to strengthen it and make it a world power, a world recognized Islamic organization. At this time, many of the Afro Arabs did not recognize them as that because of their heretical teachings and misuse of the Quran. And so they were polite, but then they did not give the Nation of Islam full recognition, even though they gave lip service to it, but in reality they didn't. And they tried to forge these new ties, and they also tried to get financial support and mutual understanding in a fight against white racism and worldwide supremacy. They agreed on that. They agreed to helping them in this regard in 1959. Now we're talking about Afro Arabs in Saudi Arabia in particular, and even in Sudan. They agreed to that. They did have a mutual understanding about white racism, Toubab racism, and worldwide supremacy that the West was, doing and still doing today. So at this time, the Nation of Islam was again trying to, go outside the United States and try to bring out its philosophy, which was obscured, and it did not fit the Sunnah, as you know, because in the Sunnah there's no superiority in any race. We know this. There's no black over white or white over black. There's no Arab over black or Arab over white. We don't have that. Our prophet eliminated this silliness. He eliminated that. And Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has made it clear inside the Quran as well. So they gave the support to the brothers of Nation of Islam and to Malcolm, but they were still uncomfortable, as I said, with their philosophy and their Aqidah, their Islamic Aqidah. It was problematic for them. But they did not fight them at the time on it. And so at this time now, Malcolm had begun to forge ties with many prominent Afro Arabs in Saudi Arabia. And so then he went into Sudan, and Sudan is where he really blossomed, meaning he saw, and I know I was there in Sudan in 2008, 2009, early part of 2009. I was in Sudan. I know exactly what he's talking about. It is a mythical land because you have that river that we regard as the integral part of Jannah, of heaven, because that river, the Nile River, if you think about it, my brothers and sisters, it is magical. Just by the way the water runs from south to north, which is unheard of. It goes against gravity. So this has to be sent by Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And the fish have never run out of the Nile. Have you thought about this? Excuse me. The fish have never run out. You talk about 3,500 years or more, the fish are still being taken out of this river. It's bountiful. And I know the taste of this fish. I had it, and I even tasted the water there when I was there. I know the magical, it's a mythical land. I know that. And the people there, it's changed now, but at the time it was starting to change when I got there. But there's a strong Muslim base there. Very, very strong. Even though it's a Muslim country, but it's a very strong Muslim base at that time. And so he began to have connections. He met his first Afro Arab who would be influential to him. And this brother, ancestral brother, gave him a lot of insight. He did not challenge him. His name was Malik Badri. He did not challenge Malcolm on his beliefs in the NOI. What he did, because he was a scholar, he was a student, but he was a brilliant young man. He began to put Tawheed, oneness of God, oneness of Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, in the mind and heart of Malcolm. He did not challenge his heretical beliefs at the time. He did not. He didn't challenge that. He let him to have that, but he also gave him the tenets of real Islam. Malcolm, being as brilliant as smart, listened to it, and he began to wonder at that time, even 1959. And so this union between these two helped Malcolm tremendously. Now, let me give you a backdrop. Because of the relationship Malcolm had forged in Saudi Arabia and in Egypt, at this time, they were given scholarships galore to African Americans. Do you know that there was a sizable African American community in Cairo, Egypt? Very interesting, isn't it? That's right. And all this is because of the Afro Arabs who felt the plight of the African Americans and had a place for them to return, which is unheard of today. Even though we have Ghana, what they say, but that's another story. But it's not the same. Here they were given African Americans a place to stay, and even in Sudan, they were given African Americans at one time instant citizenship and protection from the white racism and the white government of the racist government of America. So this is some of the thing that again shows the connection and what happened when Malcolm began to foster these connections. They begin to help him financially by giving him the ability now to lead the black folk inside America by giving him financial support. That's right. And I'm talking about a lot of financial support, even at this time. And Saudi Arabia opened up the dialogue with Malcolm. And they even allowed their famous Salaf imams to start to train our dear brother, our ancestral brother. These are Afro Arabs. And this relationship that happened in Saudi Arabia is very interesting, very, very interesting. And it fostered new ties. And again, the Saudis had a plan at this time, far different than it is today. They had a plan at this time to empower the black man in America. Because why? Many of again, remember we talking about Afro Arabs. The real Saudi is not, as you see many of them today, very white-skinned. No. The real Saudis are like me. And anyone who's been there, even my wife, she can testify to this. Any person, you know who the real Saudis are, and they'll tell you they're dark-skinned people. And I told you about, I gave you the examples, and I gave you the proof last couple of weeks about who was in the Saudi desert way before anyone else came there. We were there. And I told you about the new prototype Arab that was created from the new arrivals who were light-skinned and the cold black-skinned Bedouin Africans who were living in the Saudi desert at the time. They began to mix, and it produced a new prototype, quote-unquote, Arab. It's kind of like me. Hair, curly, but not real kinky. My complexion or lighter, like this. So the Saudis had this envision that they were going to empower the African Americans, especially the Muslims, build masjids all through through United States, and also finance many African American programs. Now, the American government didn't like that, because here they were trying to subjugate us, because we're removed now over 100 years of slavery. They were still trying to subjugate us. They did not want African brothers empowering African Americans inside there. It worried them tremendously. This is why we've had the killings we had, like of our ancestral brother and other prominent Africans and other African Americans, because the American government does not and still do not like the union of the black man in America in particular, and the Africans and the Afro Arab. They don't want that. They don't like it. And they do everything to sow seeds to stop it. And so the Americans allowed the Saudis to send their imams to the masjids. At that time, they had no problem with that. This is way before 9/11, okay? We're talking way before. We're talking about 1959, 1960, 1961. They allowed them to come there. And many of these masajids, the Saudi imams were grooming African Americans a lot. So African Americans now were starting to get the correct Islam, the Salaf Salih, as we call that, where you get the fundamentals of the Sunnah of our Prophet. Now, I'm not talking about the Salafi that you know today, that we see in magazines, we see on TV. I know we have them here. They got long beards down to the ground and wear, clothing. Sometimes clothes are filthy with holes in it and so forth and so on, and talking crazy. No, we're not. That's not what we're talking about. The Salaf It's actually every Muslim should strive for that. This is talking about the fundamentals of Islam and the Prophet and the favorite generations that we follow them. This is the Salaf. This is the real Salaf, not the stuff you see today where they have, I'm not going to get into that, but they're deviant in many aspects, but I won't get into that. And again, as I told you, Sudan really touched him. Why? In Sudan, he noticed something. I said this before, and I know other African Americans have been there, and I know other African Americans who have traveled and did ratings on black women, quote unquote, and they have deemed this place as the place, as per capita, the most beautiful women they have ever encountered. Malcolm knew that too. He saw that. I witnessed that when I was there as well. And again, as I've said the last couple of weeks, our sisters everywhere have gotten a raw deal. But let me tell you something. In the African continent, the Afro Arab belt, if you see some of the pictures I've laid out, these are African women. These are African American women in LA. These are African women I've showed and displayed in some of my marquee and some of my talk shows. These are beautiful African women and Afro Arab women. So we don't take a back seat to nobody as far as beauty, my brothers and sisters, because we have them here on this continent. And they're far more beautiful inside as well than even on the outside. And so I want you to understand that, because Malcolm saw the same thing that I saw. He saw this, and he saw the piety of the Sudanese people. He saw the grand masjids and all the Sheikh Islams. It impressed him tremendously. And our ancestral brother, Malik Badri, who was so close to Malcolm at this time. When Malcolm came, that's how they met. He guided Malcolm through the Sudan, and he began to nurture him slowly. This friendship will last all the way to the end. A couple of years later, after when Malcolm was assassinated. And the Sudanese people at this time had a reference for the black man. And they knew of his plight because they had Sudanese there inside the United States in the late 50s and the 60s. So they knew the plight. And they had a affinity for the black man inside America. They had affinity for them because if anyone knows about the Afro Arabs of Sudan, they're black folk. Brothers, they're black folk. And they have a range of colors just like we do in America. That's why when I walk through Sudan, nobody ever knows I'm American until I speak. And then when they hear me even speak Arabic, they know the accent is not Sudanese. So they say, hey, brother, where are you from? Are you from, oh man, where are you from? And then I said, no, I'm from America. And sometimes they laugh. They said, no, you're not. They didn't believe that I was from the United States. But they look tremendously like many African Americans in complexion, hair texture, body build, and so forth and so on. This is why African Americans who go there are indistinguishable. You do not know when somebody walked past you. I had that experience where African American walked past me when I was in Sudan. I didn't know he was African American. I did not know until all of a sudden I heard him talk to the cab. I heard the accent. I turned. I said, whoa, wait a minute. And the brother was from Washington, D.C., but he was there for some type of thing, seminar or whatever, and he was about ready to go home. But I did not recognize. I thought he was a Sudanese brother. See, so the Sudanese people at the time had a lot of care for the African Americans. They were worried about them. They prayed for them. They even offered assistance in many ways by giving, again, African Americans access to, at this time, beautiful Islamic institutions inside Sudan. And let me tell you something. Some of the older, prosperous imams that are inside the United States, they were trained in Sudan, my brothers and sisters who are Muslims. I just wanted to get you to understand that. Sawaj Rahaj was one of them, the famous Father Sheikh of the Muslims inside the United States had his mentor there in Sudan. So not only Malcolm, we have had other African Americans who have been mentored by their Afro Arab black brothers in Sudan. This relationship has been swept under the rug. Shameful. Now, Imam Malcolm Al Hajj, Malcolm X, also in Sudan, had a great reference to one of my favorite, also Muhammad al-Mahdi, who fought the British and killed, Chinese Gordon, the racist British crusader who they were trying to colonize at the time, trying to colonize Sudan. He had a great reference to him because he was a strong, devout Muslim. And the jihad to throw the French, to keep the British out was real. And they fought the British, and he finally slayed Chinese Gordon, was his name. He got his famous name for what he did in China. But one thing that Imam Malik was upset about, now the American government began to put his footprints inside Sudan. Imam Malik saw that, and he expressed his displeasure to his Sudanese brothers about the Toubab American presence in Sudan. Now you say, yeah, that's racist. Well, let me tell you what they were doing, though, as they do now from the embassies today. They spreaded misinformation and disinformation against African Americans to make a wedge between the Sudanese, our brothers, the Afro Arabs, and Black Americans. They were sowing the seed of deceit. And Malcolm caught them at that. Back inside the United States, they go and talk against their African brothers. See? This devilish charlatan type of system that they employ. While in Sudan, they talk against the African Americans. Stupid, ignorant, lazy criminals, da-da-da-da. There, came back inside the United States, they go to prominent African Americans and say, oh, your African brothers are stupid, lazy, can't read and write, dirty, da-da-da, swinging from trees, the whole thing. Now you understand where this stuff came from, especially from swinging from trees and eating banana and acting like monkeys. They promoted that a lot. And if my dad was here, he's long past now, he told me the story too of what the Toubab said when they were in France. They said that they were monkeys and they had a tail. And my dad told me when he was in the military at the time, he was walking down the street and him and other black soldiers and with the young French boys and girls, they would laugh and they would come and pull the jacket of the black soldier to find the tail, because this is what the Toubab, racist Toubab, was telling. So they were still at it even in the 50s and the 60s to try to put this wedge between us and the Afro Arab by talking against the other. When he's in Africa, he talks against African Americans. When he came back to America, he talked against the Africans. Malcolm caught them at this, and he expressed his dismay about them and told some of his brothers that this type of false propaganda was wrong and they should take action to get them out of there. And you see what happened. They didn't do it. And now who's running Sudan today? A lot of the problems you see today in Sudan is fostered because of the American presence inside Sudan. Let's be honest. And this is true. They have did a number, especially on the Arab states. And this is why we have all this turmoil in it. So Imam Malik used his experience in the Arab states and African states to rebuke the racist Toubab American and Europeans as well. And so by 1960 or so, he began to, he was receiving his, he was corresponding with the brilliant student I told you, Malik Badri, who he first began to learn the Sunni al-Jamaat, our Aqidah. And so now they're corresponding. Malcolm is starting to change now a little bit. By 1962, Malcolm had begun to start to feel the change. He started to question the heretical NOI's policies as far as black superiority and white inferiority and so forth. And they were misquoting the Quran. The NOI was. They were using certain Arabic words and they switched the tafsir around to make it as though Subhanahu wa ta'ala was saying against the Toubab, which is not the case in the Quran. It's not the case at all. So again, Malik Badri tried to nurture softly our ancestral brother to bring him from this softly by giving him seeds of Tawheed, oneness of God, and talking to his brother in a gentle manner. Now we're going to get to the brothers. I have to mention them. Our Afro Arab brothers who were influential that you don't know much about because they keep this stuff quiet and they don't want you to know about them. And I'm going to go through each one of these and what happened with Malcolm, how influenced him. And again, my brothers and sisters, Malcolm had basically 3 lives. He had his early life where, he saw his father. We know the story of Malcolm, Imam Malik. We know his story. And he had 3 lives. Then he had the second life where he was a gangster. He was a thug. He was a pimp, a drug peddler and pusher. We know the second part of his life. The third part of his life was when he came out and he went to Nation of Islam and he began to have some tenets of Islam. Yes. And he straightened up to be one of the most pious men. And here's a funny thing. Even the FBI and CIA who followed Malcolm, because that was their job when he went overseas, wrote documents talking about his piety. They didn't like him, yes, but they had to admit that they found his piety, his sincerity was real. This is coming from intelligence agents who were following Imam Malik at this time. And so now 1962 was the turning point, my brothers and sisters. Our brother Malik Badri had now got him to a point to start to listening to him about the real Islam. And he was still nurturing him softly. But now here's come the hammer. Some of the Sudanese Afro Arabs who were in New York City and so forth knew of the NOI, and they knew there was heretical in their teachings. They knew of the brilliance of Malcolm, Imam Malik. They knew that. But they began to openly challenge the NOI and Malcolm at that time, which was unheard of. And the first one who did this was Yahya Hayari. And he was a Sudanese student that had got scholarship there inside the United States. He was a brilliant man. This young man here was in Sudan, and he was a brilliant student. The Americans gave him a scholarship to go to Dartmouth, Ivy League school. He was a brilliant young Islamic scholar. Brilliant brother. And he was taken back by the NOI and their heretical teaching. So he began to talk against the NOI and against Malcolm. And even published a story in the Pittsburgh Gillette, I think, which was a black newspaper, if I'm not mistaken. And he published an article about the Nation of Islam and about Elijah Muhammad. And he prefaced it by saying the Hajj of Elijah Muhammad, because he went to Hajj first before Malcolm. And that's another story. I don't want to get deep into that. Why Malcolm didn't do it first. No, he gave the honor to his first mentor, which was Elijah Muhammad. He let him do it. But it's Yahya who said that Hajj was wrong. He made mistakes in it, which angered the NOI. It angered it because no one challenged them outright. Yet the Toubab did. The Toubab only challenged him on racial issues. But here you have somebody who's a real Muslim and a scholar that now this is the first time someone came to challenge them. So he did. Malcolm, Imam Malik, challenged Yahya. He challenged him, and they had sparring and whatnot. And at this time, he basically said to him, he said, look, brother, you ain't nothing but a colonial-minded black man, which is an insult, because since he attacked his mentor, and Yahya took it in stride, he let him say what he said, because he corrected the NOI on his Islamic beliefs, which was not Islamic. They were something other than that. So Malcolm respected him because he saw him to be a bright and intelligent black man. So now, by 1963, Yahya was walking down the street, and lo and behold, Malcolm was talking at one of their spots. And in there, my brother says, excuse me for a minute, we have pornography popping up in the screen here. Excuse me for a minute while I get this smut out of my chat. Here's okay. It was removed. I see another one popped up here. Oh, here it is. Here. Okay, it was deleted. Okay, good. I'm sorry, my brothers and sisters. There's things I see that you don't see, but our enemy, the Toubab, racist Toubab American, and their allies are putting this smut on a religious program. I've complained so many times to YouTube, and the same people put the stuff. They don't seem to do anything against them. Funny, isn't it? But let me talk something against the Toubab and call them other names, and then they're ready to close me down. But they allow them to put this smut on the TV on my program here, and other African Americans as well. Shame on them for that. Now, Yahya was walking with another Sudanese student when he heard Malcolm giving a speech inside one of the Nation Islam's study halls. So he walked in. And at the end of Imam Malcolm X's speech, Yahya began to challenge again Malcolm. Malcolm accepted the challenge, but many of the brothers and sisters inside the room at the time, it was about 500 people from Nation Islam and others too, were taken back by Yahya, and they didn't want him to talk. Malcolm silenced him and says, no, let our brother speak. So he began to challenge him on the tenets of Islam and the passages in the Quran, which was good. And one of the challenges was Surah 9, 51, which, I talk about this a lot in other shows. If Saeed was here, Saeed Abu Bakr, his program, THC, his program, I talked about, and I always use 51, which is a very poignant thing about relations between Jews, Christians, and Muslims. I won't get into that right now, but it was contention on that. He explained it very well. At this time, the two brothers began to have mutual respect for one another. And Yahya Hayari would be a lifelong friend to the time of Malcolm's death. They became very close. And Malcolm would go to him to get guidance, also talk to him about verses, and they would confide in one another. This is an Afro Arab. And so now they have now established their relations. Now another Afro Arab from Sudan is entered the mix. His name was Ahmed Sadiq Uthman, and he was a renowned student as well. He spoke perfect Arabic and English, and he was also given a scholarship to come to study in the United States. Malcolm became acquainted with him, and this situation again, where he took on the beliefs of the NOI, and he tried to get Malcolm away from that and try to tell him this is heretical. The Quran doesn't say this. And Malcolm now had already been softened up somewhat by Yahya Hayari, because he softened him up some. You know what I mean? He started to talk to him about the verses of the Quran, and now here's come Ahmed Sadiq Usman. He came, and then now Malcolm was already kind of softened up now, so he was ready to listen, and so he challenged his brother, and they talked about issues, black issues, Islamic issues, and so forth and so on. But here is where now our brother began to start to get in contact with famous, introduce him to the Muslim Brotherhood. Everybody knows who they are in Europe. We had formed in Europe, and they had what is called the Islamic Center of Geneva. He got him in contact with the brothers there. And the brothers there began to send Malcolm books on Salaf ideology, meaning, again, fundamental Islamic principles. So he began to read these books. And let me see. Yeah, funny that France is the same country that tried to make Musa while there. Yes, it's true. Yes, my dear brother, you're right on that. The relationship that now our brother was fostering with the African Arabs was taking him to new heights, because he was starting to meet them inside the United States. He already had his first encounter with Malik Badri. He was his guide there in Sudan. Now he's starting to meet more prominent Afro Arabs who would shape his thinking and his life tremendously. He wrote this, and now we have our brother who's doing a thing on our brother. He was talking about, because his father was close to Malcolm. He was Afro Arab, and I believe from Sudan. He was close, so he gave firsthand accounts, because his father told him, and plus he had documents where they had, his father kept diaries of his meetings with Malcolm and so forth and so on. The Pan Africanists and the racist, also Toubab Arabs, pushed it on the rug. They don't want you to know about that. And so Ahmed Uthman and Malcolm also developed a close relationship. So this relationship now with the Muslim Brotherhood was something. And the leader of this at the time was the son-in-law of Hassan al-Banna. He was the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, in Egypt. So he was now being indoctrinated to the Salaf philosophy, which, again, all Muslims should adopt, because this is, again, in theory, this is the Sunnah of the Prophet correctly, and the ways and means and the teachings of the favorite first three generations. This is what the Salaf actually means, not the stuff you see today, as I explained before. It's weird philosophies and men with beards down to their ground, wearing clothing and so forth and so on, and acting in a certain manner. That's not Salafia. Okay, let's make that clear. That's not. But I won't get deeper into that. Now, Imam Malik now was starting to have enemies inside Nation Islam, because they saw Malcolm beginning to change. They saw him now start having contacts now with powerful figures. Even President of Cuba, Fidel Castro at the time, even came to visit Malcolm. You had African leaders and Afro Arab leaders came to visit Malcolm. So there are enemies inside the Nation of Islam against Malcolm. You had intelligence, American agencies who wanted him dead. We all know that. And I'm not going to get into who's responsible for killing him. I cannot get into that, because as Muslims, we don't have proof. So we can't even speculate on it. Even though we all human beings, we have some speculations, but I cannot give you that because I don't have the proof. But we know there was entities behind his killing. We know this, and stuff is starting to come out, but we still don't have nothing clear cut, especially now they released the brothers who allegedly supposed to kill our brother. Now they knew they were innocent. So who actually did it? See, we don't know. That's why we can't go implicate all of the agencies inside the United States. Or we can't implicate some pencil neck, redneck, or some Klansman or a mafia inside America. We don't know who is responsible for his death. And they say Nation of Islam was responsible. We don't have clear proof of that as well, because did they actually order the hit? We do not know. We don't have all this evidence, even though it's speculated. Excuse me, my brother and sister. There's another one of these pornographic things here. It's come up here. Okay. Now, the African leaders, Latino leaders, and many others, Asian leaders, begin to come towards and gravitate towards Malcolm. Now, here is where we had the difficulties within the Nation of Islam and Malcolm, as Malcolm began to become powerful. He is now a lion. Malcolm is now a lion. He was no more, he was a lamb. He first come in, he was being nurtured, and now he's a full-fledged grown male lion. His influence inside nationalism was very great. He had many followers, and it was almost like a separation began to occur. You had those who wanted to follow Malcolm, and those who wanted to keep on with the tradition of Elijah Muhammad. And it caused a dissension inside there. So I won't get into why Malcolm was suspended. We all know the story behind that. And they thought they would silence him. They thought that they would knock out his influence, but they actually did him a favor. He became 100 times more powerful after that. And so as Imam Malik began to foster these relationships, he makes another trip back to Africa and to the Afro Arab belt. It was set up by now another famous person who was a grand Sheikh Islam by the name of Mahmoud Sharbi. He was a Toubab Arab. Malcolm and him became very close. He would go visit him and get ideas, talk about the Quran, and so forth and so on. It's him who set up Malcolm with King Faisal. If you remember who he was assassinated. King Faisal gave a permit for Malcolm to come to make Hajj. And it was our ancestral brother here, Mahmoud Sharbi, that facilitated that. Now, my brothers and sisters, I hope I'm long here today, but I'm trying to get you a picture here to see. I'm giving you a history, perhaps some of this you don't know about, because they have conveniently left out all of these Toubab Arabs and the Afro Arabs in his life. Maybe one or two's mentioned here and there, but they left out all of this. That's why I'm bringing it up, because in honor of my ancestral brother, I have to bring this stuff out. I can't do this in 10 minutes. I have to do this, whatever long it takes. I will honor my brother. I will give the information from other Afro Arabs who have been silenced by our Pan-Africanist brothers and by the racist Toubab Arab historians who've been silenced by them. So I'm going to give this out. And like I say, because it should be out, and you do your research. And now it's out there. And you'd be shocked. So, oh, I didn't know this guy was involved. I didn't know this country's involved. You didn't. Now I'm bringing this stuff out. So the grand scholar Mahmoud Sharbi introduced basically King Faisal to Malcolm, even though Malcolm had been to Saudi Arabia before, but he did not have the juice, so to speak, at that time. So he was being trained and groomed. Now you see all of these Afro Arabs, each one had a specialty that began to nurture and mentor Malcolm. And now this is going to bear seed. When the Nation of Islam finally said, "You out," you're suspended. Malcolm, as you know, finally quit, but he took back to Africa, and he went to Hajj. King Faisal, the prince, greeted Malcolm as he was a head of state. He gave him the head of state visitors pass, where they're treated and courted with all the amenities that only the heads of state get. This is what he gave Malcolm. Malcolm stayed in the best hotel in Saudi Arabia. And King Faisal made a point to have one-on-one discussions with him. Now, how many do we know of that, of African Americans, so to speak, that had this type of juice? And this is happening, you're talking about the early 60s. We ain't talking about present day now. We're talking about in the 60s, which was unheard of. So Malcolm, at that time, was preparing himself for Hajj. There, because you had dignitaries, Muslim dignitaries from all over, Malcolm became friends. This is the start of how Malcolm became so powerful outside the United States, more powerful outside of the United States than he was inside the United States. Powerful friends, rich and famous Muslims from Africa, from the so-called Middle East, from Asia. He became acquainted with these ancestral brothers, and he became influential and powerful, to where anytime he stepped into any African country, he was given the head of state visitors pass. How many African Americans? And now he was not working with the American government. He was not under the Americans, their tutelage. He was not. He was independent from them. He didn't take their advice, and nor was he was being controlled by them. He was his own man. So everywhere he stepped, I don't care if he went to Algeria, where he met President at that time, Ben Bella. Ben Bella treated him like a head of state. This is how powerful our brother had become. And again, Afro Arabs, okay, and some from the Toubab Arabs were nurturing our dear brother. This is why the fallacy that Malcolm had gotten all of his power, all his nurturing and training there in America is not true. It's a lie, my brothers and sisters. It's a story. It's a lie. Malcolm was already brilliant, yes, but he was brilliant as far as English and learning how to speak good English, because he was an expert orator. He memorized the dictionary and so forth and so on. Here he was being trained in other facets that he did not have the knowledge of at that time. But when he began to receive it, it began to take off like a wildfire in him. This nurturing was by our ancestral African Arab brothers, and some who were Toubab Arabs. And at Saudi Arabia, and before the Hajj, he began to meet all kind of other Muslims who were white folks from Eastern Europe, and so forth and so on. So now his racial theories was now being put to rest. He saw brotherhood in Islam that he did not see and all his time inside the United States. He saw Islam bringing all colors and races to one. And you know, in Islam, when we go make prayer, there's no hierarchy. There's no line there, or there's no part that says a black man, you pray here, a white man prays here, the president of a country prays here, and the poor man prays over here. No. Whoever comes to the line first is where you go. And whoever's to your left and right in the prayer line, that's it. There's no hierarchy of that. So now Sheikh Sharbi had introduced Malcolm to Prince Faisal. Prince Faisal, the king of Saudi Arabia at that time, began to introduce Malcolm to powerful world figures, Muslims and other blacks and other Asians and other Afro Arabs and even the Turks. Interesting, my brothers and sisters, very interesting. And so he attended Hajj on the invitation of the Crown Prince. And I can't understate that the prince, the King Faisal, he really took care of our ancestral brother. He really cared for him. And it was evident, very evident about the conversations they had together. There's pictures showing those two having intimate conversations, not intimate, I don't mean that in a bad way, excuse me, but private conversations they were holding. And so what happened at this point, he had gave a pledge to Malcolm that he would start to elevate the African Americans inside the United States by financing. Again, my brothers and sisters, this is the Afro Arab connection with our people inside the United States that's been obscured and deliberately held from us. So he decided to give scholarships, and many African American promising imams graduated from there that we know today. Some have died now, but some are still living. They graduated from the prestigious Islamic universities there inside Saudi Arabia, thanks to ancestral brother King Faisal. Now, I'm not going to get into what he did and what he did not do inside in his reign. I'm not going to get into that. We're talking about his relationship with Malcolm and with the African Americans. That's what I'm concentrating on now. I'm not talking about what he was right, what he's wrong, and how he governed the land. I'm not going to get into that. Anyway, he's passed on. You know, he was assassinated, so I'm not going to get into that. Back home, the Toubab American agencies were going crazy. They didn't know what to do with Malcolm. And jealous Uncle Tom house Negroes also didn't know what to do with Malcolm as well. Many Muslim leaders were jealous of Malcolm inside the United States. They didn't know what to do with Malcolm either, because now Malcolm was not operating under the NOI. He was not operating under the American government. He was his own man. When he stepped, he was outside the country. He was like a king. They treated him like a president of a country. He was now meeting. He was like he was some Secretary of State. He had easy access. He could go anywhere in Asia, no problem. They put him up. He could have went to China, Japan. All of them honored him and treated him as though he was the head of state. So you had those factions. And then inside the NOI as well, there was a lot of rumblings. And we do know that there was rumblings of some who wanted to take our ancestral brother Malcolm out. We know this. We can admit to this. We have documents that show that some of this was actually talked about. So Malcolm was in a precarious situation. He was getting prestige outside the United States, but inside the United States, he knew he'd go back in there. His time was numbered. He would be killed. He knew that. He knew. So now the ties of with the Saudis helped him to meet another famous person. This was a Turk, a white man, a Turkish Muslim. And this particular Muslim was very close to the royal family of Saudi Arabia, and he became a minister inside Egypt. He was the one responsible for taking Malcolm around inside Saudi Arabia and hosting him and so forth and so on. He was a very white-skinned man with bluish eyes. That's right. A white, you can call him white Arab, but he's Turkish. But he spoke Arabic language, and he was part of the Egyptian government. So we can call him Arab because his language, he was speaking Arab. He's classified as a Toubab Arab because he was a very white man. He became very close with Malcolm as well. And so now we have this backdrop. We have King Faisal nurturing our ancestor brother. We have our brother here from Turkey, Pasha, who was also nurturing our dear brother. It's him who got him set up in Egypt. And this is where things begin to take off as well. But before he got to Egypt, King Faisal asked Malcolm to stay additional 30 days. There, he began to talk to Malcolm about the plight of Black people inside America, and plus his relationship with the NOI. There's been a lot of speculation what was being told. There's a lot of speculation. I don't want to speculate. I have my ideas because he was alerting him to something at that time. But we don't have proof of this, but I got a feeling this is what has happened. And he began to meet with Malcolm and express concern on a many different fronts, especially NOI's, their Black nationalist teachings inside the Islamic framework, which we don't have that because there's no Black nationalism or any other type of nationalism inside Islam. It's heretical. We cannot do that. So anyway, the Pasha began to talk to Malcolm, and he introduced Malcolm to some of the dignitaries in Egypt. But before that, Prince Faisal, the king of Saudi Arabia at the time, introduced him to a very dark-skinned Afro Arab by the name of Mohammed Shaban. And he was so impressive to our ancestral brother. And they held a lot of talks. And he was so impressed with him that he actually named the first masjid that he built after he left, after he got off from NOI under his name. It was him that also convinced the Saudi government to finance the African Americans inside the United States and to bring them into Saudi Arabia to be trained and schooled. He was also instrumental in that. And Malcolm loved him dearly. And Malcolm mentioned him, I think, in his memoir and also in some of his diary. He mentioned him. He had reference to him. He loved him dearly. And so now Hassan Azam Pasha, the Turkish man, was the instrument part to now get Malcolm into Messer, into Egypt. And so he began to introduce him to many prominent Arabs, African Arabs inside Egypt. Now he's made his trek into Egypt. And there he began to meet some of the most powerful Egyptians. And he met the Grand Mufti as well. And you got to remember something about Hassan Azam Pasha. He was Turkish, but he was an Egyptian minister. It said he was the father of the Arab League. It's him who helped to create it. And he was a Turk, a white-skinned Turk man from Turkey, Turkish. And so now inside Egypt, Malcolm began to even foster a relationship with the then president, Nasser. Remember him? He died. And remember, I'm not going to get into what happened inside Egypt, what he did, what he did not do. But we know some of the stories. But he had a very deep relationship, again, with Malcolm. And inside Egypt at this time, because of his relationship with the president of Egypt, Nasser was a very, very prominent man in the lives of many African Americans, not only Muslims, but jazz and comics and some of the black communist theories of some of the, our brothers who there and escaped. He gave them haven in Cairo, Egypt. And at this time, there was a sizable African American presence inside Cairo. That was kept away from many African Americans. They didn't know this. Who fostered that? The president of Egypt did. Not only that, the president of Egypt, Nasser, also gave scholarships to African Americans to come to Azhar, the famous Islamic university in Egypt. And many, now they're very old, much older than me. Some are older than I am, much older than I. And they graduated from there. That's why I was telling you about some brilliant brothers graduated from these universities. And he gave them scholarships to come to learn under Azhar. Now here is the kicker. Malcolm had gained so much knowledge now from all of these imams and all these Afro Arab scholars and so forth and so on. He got his degree quickly there at Azhar. They gave him a ijaza, what we call this. This is a document of Islamic jurisprudence saying that you could be an imam and you can teach the fundamentals of Islam at a masjid. This is what you get when you get out of Azhar. They'll give you this paper saying that you're qualified now to teach the Islamic principles. And they gave him now the title Imam. He's now Imam Malcolm Al Hajj. He did this within 1 year, my brothers and sisters. It takes you 4 years or longer to graduate. Our brother Malcolm was so intelligent and smart that he passed out through the exams. He passed out through all the knowledge because he was being trained. The muftis trained him. The muftis talked to him. His knowledge was so great, he passed through the books within 1 year. This is how great our ancestral brother. Anybody who knows anything about Azhar, it's a tough university. It's even an Arabic language. It's very difficult. It's not easy. It's no walk. It's a very difficult university to pass through. Very difficult. And some African Americans go there and they flunk out. But many have graduated from there. And in recent times now, of course, with all the advent of racism, it's very difficult for African Americans to get selected there, even in Medina, there in Saudi Arabia. It's very difficult. They won't allow us to go in there anymore. It's very difficult because we know who's behind that. But now Egypt has entered the fray. They have now also begun to help Malcolm. They also now begin to foster the relationships with African Americans inside singers, musicians, and so forth, malcontents that begin to flood Egypt. I wish we had this type of haven today, which we don't have. In those days, in the late 50s and 60s, they had the havens, and Afro Arabs were giving them these havens. This is why I said to you, my brothers and sisters, we should understand the relationship that we had from the beginning with the Afro Arabs before we condemn them all in present day, because we have misconduct on both sides. African American misconduct, and we have Afro Arab and Toubab Arab misconduct. Bottom line, we know that. And we should understand and understand this history here that's been swept under the rug because they want to keep fostering this problem between us. They want this to keep going because as long as we keep separated, this is what they want, because they don't want another situation like they had on their hands here in the late 50s and the 60s with another Malcolm given influences, and then you have leaders now influenced by a African American who starts to fund African Americans back in America. They don't want that. So this is why it's for them. They spend millions to sow the seed of deceit and problems between us. And so now the Grand Mufti gave Ijaza, again, the paper for Malcolm. He returned back to the United States. And this is about a year before, maybe 8 months before that he was assassinated. There, inside the United States, he began to forge some, he began to bring his own people on board, and he began to create his own institutions. Then he went back to Mecca. Then he went into Sudan. And now the last prominent person and the most influential of all of the Afro Arabs was this one great, humble Sheikh Islam, a Sudanese African Arab. He was with Malcolm at the time of death. And it was him who gave Malcolm really deep Islamic knowledge. This brilliant Sudanese Afro Arab ancestor was fluent in Arabic and English, and he knew the Quran very, very well. He was introduced by another Sudanese student. And let me tell you something, my brothers and sisters. At Hajj, many Sudanese saw Malcolm, even though Malcolm did not know them, but they knew of Malcolm. They began to go up and grab and hug Malcolm. And there's pictures that show this. They took, like selfies, what we call today, with him. These are Sudanese, okay? Afro Arabs from Sudan began to take pictures with Malcolm because he was famous even inside Sudan now. And so he was introduced to the famous Sheikh Islam of Sudan. And this is Ahmed Hassoun, Rahim Allah. Now he would follow Malcolm back to the United States, and he would begin teaching. And let me give you a backdrop about this famous ancestral brother, Rahim Allah, because he's passed on in 1987. He did not dress in modern Western clothing. Even when he was in New York City, he still wore the long piece, the tobe and his imam. And now he was getting old. He would walk with a cane. And in Sudan, this is Sunnah. This is their Sunnah in Sudan. I know that. You have the walking cane. Africa, the Africans, black Africans too, they like the walking canes. That's what they call it. They walk with a cane. So he walked with a cane. Even New York City, he still kept his Islamic identity. And he would nurture Malcolm and nurture him and mentor him. And he would give him all this knowledge. And so now the Sheikh had gotten word as well that Malcolm's life was really in danger. At this time, many people broke away from Malcolm. And Malcolm was now kind of alone. His beloved Sheikh would talk to him on the phone, but he urged his beloved Sheikh not to come around because he was afraid that he would be assassinated, and he was afraid that he'd be responsible for his Sheikh's death. It was getting a critical time. Now, this is very close to his assassination. Now, everybody knows the program that's been about Malcolm and the gangster. I can't think of his name now. Bumpy Johnson. Yeah, that was true. Bumpy Johnson also had a relationship with Malcolm. Bumpy Johnson, we know from documents, was well aware of the plots because other gangsters heard that. I'm going by what they said, okay? I'm not going by what I said or what I think. They said that the plot was coming from NOI. So Bumpy Johnson was actually making surveillance as well to protect his brother Malcolm. And I told you in other stories about this, that Malcolm enjoyed complete freedom. He could walk into Hispanic gangster areas. They all loved him. They respected him. The black gangsters respected Malcolm as well. He had no problem. He could go eat at any place, even in Spanish Harlem. He could eat. Nobody messed with him. Everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. He was respected. So Bumpy Johnson now was making surveillance to intercept any of NOI or any person tried to kill Malcolm. But so Sheikh Hassan now was very concerned about his pupil, about Malcolm. And other prominent leaders like Dick Gregory, who's passed on, was close friends to Malcolm as well. He expressed concern. He kept telling Malcolm he had to be careful. And he also was aware of the plot. World leaders who knew Malcolm, excuse me. Okay. He knew Malcolm. And the mood of many of the people that knew Malcolm was sorrowful because they knew it's only a matter of time. It's too much talk about assassination. Malcolm became melancholy, and Sheikh Hassan has wrote about this. Also, Malik Badri, who was his first Afro Arab context, talked about this. And some other Sudanese and other Saudi Afro Arabs talked about this. They were all upset because they could do nothing to save their brother. That's right. And so we look at this sorrowful time in American history, and why this is why we have the old African adage: how can chicken love the fox? Because they know the fox is there to eat it. So how can he love it? This is what I'm saying to you now. How can an African American, knowing what he have done for 400, 500 years, kill off some of our brightest leaders, kill them off like this, and we're supposed to have reverence for them? You cannot. It's not natural. You say forgive them. Well, how are you going to forgive the person who's working with the devil? You cannot forgive them. Again, we're not talking about every single white person. That is Islamically, it is wrong. We're talking about that. We're talking about the people who were responsible, who were involved, who are racist, who are still killing African Americans even today. We're talking about those folks. We're not talking about the good Toubab, because remember, every organization inside the United States, black organization, we always had Toubabs in them, and Jews. Let's get our facts straight, my brothers and sisters. And some of them even died along with African Americans. Remember John Brown? Remember the revolution? Remember him? He was trying to free slavery. Remember slavery time? He died along with African Americans. You know, I won't get into the history. You know, they had a fight with the government troops. You remember him? So we always had benevolent Toubabs that always stayed with African Americans. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about the crazy racist people like the head of the FBI at the time and some of the and others who were hardened racist. We're talking about those. How can we love them and forgive them and pray for them? We cannot. So now Malcolm was very concerned. So was his family. As you know, they began to firebomb his house. They began to talk to him on the telephone and give him death threats. And many of the prominent people that he knew, African Americans, began to walk away from him. So now our ancestral brother was alone. Sheikh Hassan was very old. Malcolm urged him to stay away because he loved his sheikh. He did not want to see him get killed. So he urged him to stay away. Now we have a matter of days before our ancestral brother was going to be assassinated. World leaders that we knew at this time were preparing for his death. And it's sad for me as a black man, somebody who idolized this man, to continue to hear his story, because no black person, a black man, cannot have sorrowful feelings in his heart for what happened to our ancestral brother, Malcolm. Any African-American man who talk against this man, our ancestral brother, is an apostate and an Uncle Tom and a house Negro. Cannot talk against this man. This man was pious. He was a brilliant, brilliant man. He bridged together Africans and Arabs. Who do we have to rival that today? We have nobody. Any African-American man who talks against Malcolm is an apostate. In my mind, he's a down the river Negro and he's an apostate. And anybody who talks about and they go and they praise the people who's behind his murder, he's got to be an apostate. And shame on them. Even though he came on the same slave ships with us, I don't care. And it saddens me that we have this story like this, and we've had other African Americans we know who are hung up by trees, hung up on the trees by racist Toubab. This lynching here was so systematic, we still today don't know who was behind it, even though we think we know. That's how great the intention was to stuff out his life. And they wanted to make sure that no other African American could come and do like what Malcolm had done. So now we're at the point, days before Malcolm was to be assassinated. Dick Gregory, who went to Chicago fearing that he would be caught in some ambush, called Malcolm and told Malcolm, don't speak at the ball. He feared that he'd be assassinated. And he told Malcolm he cannot join him as much as he wanted to, but he could not because he knew that he would probably kill too. And you know, we got to understand something. It's not easy to be martyred, you know, and I'm not, Dick Gregory was not a Muslim, but I mean, it's not easy to be killed for a movement or for something, because he had family and plus he was influential. And he felt that it was his time now to do this. So he warned Michael. He told him, don't go there. Now, Malcolm decided, even at the words of Bumpy Johnson, the gangster, he told him, don't go. We can't protect you there. But Malcolm decided anyway he was going to go there. So he went. When he came through the door, who was there to greet him? Many don't know about this either, because again, our Pan-Africanist brothers have kept this quiet. There was a Japanese woman. Yes, my brothers and sisters. She was also a black nationalist, and she was Japanese. And she was a close confidant of Malcolm. You read about her. She's in, you can read her in Google about her. And she kept to her black nationalism all the way. I think she's dead now, or she's very old. I can't recall now. She's got children and everything, but she still kept her black nationalist ties. She's Japanese. Malcolm came in. She greeted Malcolm, and she felt what she said would this would be the last time she would see him. She said this. She said she was moved to tears. Malcolm walked in the ballroom, of course, and we know what happened from that point. And it's a sad epitaph. And this is not easy even for me. It's a person who idolized our ancestral brother. It's not easy. And our Japanese sister, our ancestral sister, when Malcolm was gunned down, and they don't tell the truth, there was two people that came to his aid. One was an FBI agent who was assigned to Malcolm, but undercover. He was acting like he was a black Muslim, when in fact he was FBI agent. And Japanese sister, our ancestral sister, she was also there. And she said these words to him. She said, "Malcolm, hold up, don't die." She kept telling Malcolm, "Hold up, don't die." Our Pan-African brothers keep that from us, didn't they? They didn't want you to know about this Japanese woman, nor they want you to know about the African Arabs I talked about here for over an hour now. Now our brother passed. African American leaders, hypocrites, as many were, now begin to talk about Malcolm. And you know that he forged a relationship now with Martin Luther King. Even though they had buck heads for many years. But after Malcolm came back from his studies, and after he came back from Azhar, he got his degree. He is now a leader. Imam means leader in Arabic. He began to forge a relationship with another ancestral brother by the name of Martin Luther King. We all know who he was. And even he was dismayed. And of course, you know what happened to him shortly after that too, as well. And you know what's fascinating about this, my brothers and sisters? Both Malcolm and Martin Luther King were 39 years old when they were assassinated. Interesting, isn't it? Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So now Malcolm was assassinated. They took some brothers who they claim they saw shot Malcolm. Now we know from these guys being released, it was not them. But we knew they were black men who did the shooting. So who were these black men? The ones that they arrested and put in jail for all these years were not them. Now they proved that it was not them. The American government knew that. And I think they probably know even to this, maybe these guys are dead now. Maybe that's why they released them, these innocent brothers who they said made the crime. So anyway, as Malcolm laid there, they took him. None of the churches, none of the Islamic centers wanted to take his body out of fear that they would be assassinated. There was one church bishop, brother, didn't care. He had a big congregation. He had a big church. He said, "Put Malcolm's body here." So they put Malcolm's body inside this one church, and this brave ancestral pastor, he's passed on as well, gave his church for Malcolm to lay rest at that time. When it's time to bury Malcolm, the hypocrite leaders, African-American leaders at that time, stayed away. And I must talk now about one ancestral brother, Ozzie Davis. He's passed on now. the Islamic so-called leaders who were strong and vibrant and so forth and so on were afraid to even give him a janazah. Janazah is the Islamic funeral prayer. But guess who braved the odds? Another Afro Arab. He was a scholar and imam. He came to give the eulogy in English, but the janazah for Malcolm. His teacher, Sheikh Hassan, gave we give a ceremonial bath before we wrap them in white. This is our sunnah when someone dies, a Muslim dies. You wrap them in white. You give them a ceremonial bath, and then you wrap them. He did this. This was again, Afro Arab. Not African American, but Afro Arab. The person who gave the janazah was not African American. They were too afraid. It was an Afro Arab who braved the odds and said, I'm going to give our brother his janazah. Afro Arab. So he gave this janazah. The world leaders who were still alive at the time who knew Malcolm and other students of Sudan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, dignitaries, black leaders, all were dismayed, upset about what happened to our ancestral brother. And one of the factors here that is, let's see what my brother says here. I'm grateful for this, Barako, you have bestowed. Thank you, my dear brother. The worldwide consternation on his death was overwhelming. The people were hurt and they were upset, and to the point that accusations, and I believe many of them knew who was behind it as well. Okay, they knew, and they tried to they tried to put a good spin on it, but they knew who was behind it. And many of the Afro Arabs had intelligence information. They know, but they've been quiet for all these years. Perhaps they may give that information out one of these days. But now most of the as we know, our leaders in the outer world are very, under the thumb of the Americans. I'm over trying to find something here because I want to give something to you to close this up, because this is something you might have heard this speech before, but I've read this speech so many times, and it's brought me to tears every time I've read it. And it's a one-of-a-kind eulogy. I don't have the ijazah of what was said by our Afro Arab imam who came to brave himself, and he talked and spoke in behalf of our ancestral brother Malcolm. And Ossie Davis, who was an aspiring actress, but he was an activist. And he talked against the injustices in the United States. Many told him don't speak because they feared, one, he'd be assassinated, two, his career as an actor would be finished. But it's not the case. He became stronger because of it. And in South Africa, Nelson Mandela was very upset. In Soweto, in Soweto in South Africa, they took to the streets to honor Malcolm, our ancestral brother. And other African cities too, they don't talk to you about this, also took to the streets to honor our brother Malcolm. They don't talk to you about that, but they did. Nelson Mandela, the late Nelson, got up before at schools to talk about our ancestral brother, the greatness of Malcolm. He called him Brother Malcolm. He went to schools to make sure that they did not forget our ancestral brother. Even him was moved to tears. That's right, my brothers and sisters. This is a profound story of your ancestral brother inside the United States, and also a testament to the relationship that he fostered with African Arabs. And African Arabs have gotten a bad rap because of what has happened in the past, and because of the misunderstandings, and because things have been kept from African Americans about them. Now I'm giving you a story, a positive story of how one of our greatest African Americans was tutored, mentored, loved, respected by Afro Arabs and Toubab Arabs, stretching from Morocco all the way across, even into Syria. These are Arabs that many of you African Americans hate. And their story has been kept from you, my dear brothers inside the United States. But it was them who braved the bullets. It was them who came to give the eulogy when African Americans are born there, and they're supposed to be imams, and they're supposed to be Muslims, and they were afraid to give our brother his right under the Sharia. And they're supposed to give him a janazah. They didn't do it, but an African Arab did. That's right. So I talked about Nelson Mandela. We talked about the relationships. Now here's come Ossie Davis, our famous ancestral Black African American brother. And he wrote a eulogy that was off the charts. It still moves people today. It's a word and a magic. I'm talking about meaning the beauty of it. And he knew Malcolm. He loved Malcolm. He knew Malcolm's worth. And he wanted to make sure that he left a speech that will be indelible upon the minds of the enemies of Malcolm and those who love Malcolm, who are still alive, like myself. Now I'm an old man now, but I was a boy at this time, a 10-year-old boy. This beautiful speech, I have to read it. So please bear with me, my brothers and sisters. I know I've been long today, but I have to be long, just as long as I've ever been on any of my programs. But I had to bring this out, even though it's late here in Morocco, but I have to honor our ancestral brother, Malcolm. The speech reads, "Here, at this final hour, in this place, Harlem has come to bid farewell to one of its brightest hopes. Extinguished now, gone from us forever. For Harlem is where he worked, where he struggled and fought. His home of homes, where his heart was, where his people are. And it is, therefore, most fitting that we meet once again in Harlem to share these last moments with him. For Harlem has ever been gracious to those who have loved her, have fought her, have defended her honor even to death. It is not in the memory of man that this beleaguered, unfortunate, but nevertheless proud community have found a braver, more gallant young champion than this Afro-American who lies before us. Unconquered still, I say again, as he would want me to say, Afro-American. Afro-American Malcolm was a master, was most meticulous in use of his words. Nobody knew better than he the power words have over minds of men. Malcolm had stopped being a Negro years ago. It had become too small, too puny, too weak a word for him. Malcolm was bigger than that. Malcolm had become an African American, and he wanted so desperately that all his people would become Afro-Americans too. There are those who consider it their duty as friends of the Negro people to tell us to revile him, to flee and even from the presence of his memory, to save ourselves from writing out of the history of our turbulent times. Many will ask what Harlem finds to honor this stormy, controversial, bold young captain, and we will smile. Many will say, turn away from this man, for he is not a man, but a demon, a monster, a subverter, an enemy of the black man, and we will smile. They will say that he is of hate, a fanatic, a racist, who can only bring evil to the cause for which he struggled. And we will answer to them, did you ever talk to Brother Malcolm? Did you ever touch him or have smiled at him? Did you ever really listen to him? Did you ever do a mean thing? Was he ever himself associated with violence or public disturbance? For if you would know him, and if you knew him, you would know why we must honor him. Malcolm was our manhood, our living black manhood. This was this meaning to his people, and honoring him, we honor the best in ourselves. Last year from Africa, he wrote these words to a friend. My journey, he says, is almost ended. I have much broader scope than that I started out, which I believe will add new life and dimension to our struggle for freedom, honor, and dignity in the States. I'm writing these things so that you will know for a fact the tremendous sympathy and support we have among African states for our human right struggle. The main thing is that we keep a united, wherein our most valuable time and energy will not be wasted fighting each other. However, we have differed with others about him, his value as a man. Let his going from us serve only to bring us together now. Consigning these mortal remains to earth, the common mother of all, secure in the knowledge that we place in the ground is no more now a man, but a seed. After the winter of our discontent, we will come forth again to meet us. We will know him then for what he was and is, a prince, our black shining prince. We didn't hesitate to die because he loved us so. My brothers and sisters, this was by our ancestral brother, Ozzie Davis, who's passed on. And I had to read this. Again, I know I was long, but I had to read this to end this segment of the Black Man and His Family and the Afro Arab connection. I hope, my brothers and sisters, that you got something out of this tonight, that you got another aspect, a different aspect of the narrative that has been laid on us for many years about the Afro Arab and the Toubab Arab, that they had nothing to do with us except slavery, or they hate us to no end, that they did nothing to help the Black man in America. Now I gave you evidence. I've given you stories. I've given you even a proof. The man even told the story from his father's own lips, who told him to carry the story to make sure that when he passed, that the story comes out about how the African Arabs supported the African Americans in the 50s, in the 60s, in the part of the 70s, until the American government began to remove all these leaders out, assassinate them, and killing African leaders who knew Malcolm and loved Malcolm. And he began to tell a story now from what his father told him. So I hope that you got something out of this, my brothers and sisters, that you'll pray for your ancestral brother, and you Muslims in particular. You African Americans, you owe it to your lineage, those who are my generation, your children and your grandchildren are now there sitting in their homes. They're 10, 15, 20 years old, 25 years old now. They should know of Malcolm. You should not be ashamed of Malcolm. You should understand your ancestral brother. And you should understand how he fostered relationships. As I said many weeks ago in one of my programs I had about who would be best qualified to be the new president of Africa. If Malcolm was here today, I would say Malcolm. We need this type of person with this caliber who can forge the African Arabs and also forge together the Black Africans. This is who we need in Africa today, who would not be step and fetch it for the Toubab governments, who would think Africa first and think of its people first, think of its resources first, and get the best out of what our resources can bring to our continent and bring back our wealth. This is the kind of man we need for the first president, which we're going to have here in Africa one of these days. Africa's going to be reunited, my brothers and sisters. That's right. We know the Islamic tenets teaches us that this man will be a Muslim on top of that. So, my brothers and sisters, I end this segment about the African Arabs. I know I upset many of the Pan Africanists and some of the Arab nationalists. I don't care. I wanted to get this story out. And I also want to lay a seed in the mind of the Black Americans who are constantly getting on YouTube, talking against the Arabs. Foolish talk, silly talk, uncouth comments and beliefs about the African Arab, without taking their audiences back to the grand days when one of our greatest African Americans had alliances with them, who helped to finance many African Americans, who gave African Americans haven in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in some other African country, Sudan. All of these are Afro Arab. The talk shows that our brothers are getting on today don't give you that information. All they talk about is what happened to them in 2019 in a liquor store, or what happened to them when he had an accident with the African Arab or Toubab Arab, or what happened with his son at school when one Toubab Arab girl made a comment to him. This is all we get now on YouTube from brothers, from my brothers. That's all we get. We don't get no backdrop in the history about them. Or yeah, they'll talk about slavery, and then they every ill that happened to the African American and to the African, the white Arab has done that. When we know this is not the case, none of them talk about what happened with Malcolm and what happened with these Arab leaders who financed African Americans. They don't talk about that and give you that backdrop. Why don't they do that? Why do they only talk about what's happened to them in a liquor store or in some convenience store? Why do they only talk about that? Because they have no knowledge to talk about the past. They should learn their African history. They should learn it before you get on a station on YouTube and to denounce your African brother. You should understand your history. And many of you on YouTube, I don't even want to name off names of some of these brothers who hate the Arabs for crazy hate. They have no historical background or nothing to do what they do and to get on the YouTube to talk. You get on the YouTube and you talk against another African, you better back it up with history, and you better back it up with substance and with stats and with proof. Don't get up there in emotion and talk about, the African Arab, he's a white man. If I could show you the pictures of the African Arabs who helped Malcolm, even Malcolm wrote about many of them. They were black people. So my brothers and sisters, I was long for a good reason, because right is right. And we must understand our history. I'm not defending the racist Arabs that we have in America. I talk against them. I told you, I'm dismayed at them too. I wonder why they're the way they are. But as my wife can attest to, her being African Arab, she can tell you that these kind here like this who do this are even against Moroccans and other Afro Arabs of North Africa. They are even against them. So they don't even like them at all. They only like them, themselves, and those are Europeans. You see that inside the United States. But not all of the African Arabs are the same, my brothers and sisters. It's not. I've been through some of the Afro Arab states. I'm telling you now, I was not discriminated against. And you know what's hypocritical? Here, the same Toubab talks against us who have relationships with African Arabs and say, they go to you and say, hey, Yahya, hey man, how can you talk to this Arab? You know what he did to your ancestors? Yet and still, the same wretched Toubab who comes to talk to me about that has got a 400-year history of slinging our people from trees. And he's still doing it today because he wants us to stay away from our African brothers. So he comes to talk and say, hey, you know what? Why you talk to this Arab? You know, what? How can you marry with these African Arabs? How can you have relationships with them? As though he's now a protector of the black race when he's over there killing the black race inside the United States for 400 years. So my brothers and sisters, I give you this. I'm hard after my brothers, the African Americans, who are on TV today talking against the Arabs. Now, we're not talking about incidents. If you want to get on YouTube, talk about an incident you had at a liquor store or one store in LA, okay, be done with it. But to start to call the African Arabs white people is too much. Their DNA is more than African Americans. We need to stop that. And now you have a backdrop that the most prominent of our brothers, especially Malcolm, rahimahullah, was nurtured by African Arab. African Arabs nurtured him. African Arabs educated him. They helped to educate him, especially in Islam. It was them who confided with him, and he confided with them. It was them who helped him in New York City as well. After he died, who came to benefit Betty Shabazz? She's now passed on. it was our famous Sheikh who loved Malcolm dearly, Sheikh Hassoun. He came to stay with them for a while, braving the bullets. He stayed with them to nurture them and to help them. African Arab did this. No African American, African Arab did this. His Sheikh Islam did this for him. And let me tell you a story, and I'm going to close here, my brothers. Sheikh Hassan stayed there for a while, even though he was under threat for assassination too, because of his association with Malcolm. He didn't care. But he was very old now, so he finally returned back to Sudan. But Sheikh Hassoun was so grieved over his student's death. His family wrote about this, that he began to, he got sick, and many believe he was sickened there in the United States. You know what they do. And we don't have no proof, but, he got sickened. And he began to not feel good, and he began to cry a lot. And his family talked about this. And one of his tears were being shed because of the plight of the African Americans. He was there because of his love for his student, Imam Malcolm Al Hajj. This great brother died in 1987 with tears in his eyes still over his student. This is an African Arab who had this love and sentiment for an African American. So, my brothers and sisters, I leave you with the beautiful words of this African Asiatic language. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi barakatuh.